Hello, this is Matt Montgomery, Sales Agronomist with Burris. We thought we would take some time to explore mode of action just a little. There are lots of resources that explain how herbicides work, but there's a pretty big gulf when it comes to understanding how insecticides work. Today, we'll present some general information on the nervous system, and we'll give some general information on how insecticides mess the nervous system up. In other words, we're giving a brief presentation on how insecticides work. Future presentations will give a little more specific information about how specific insecticide families kill insects. This simplified diagram presents information on how the nervous system works. The brain of a person or an insect, says that something needs to happen. That signal is then sent from the brain down a nerve, and that signal tells organs in the body to do something important. In people, it tells the heart to beat, the lungs to breathe, muscles to move, etc. Now, one thing that's important to notice in our diagram is that the nerve is not exactly like an electrical wire. It's not one continuous strand that stretches from the brain to the organs. Instead, the nerve is actually a bunch of small units that are stuck together with gaps in between. These little units are called neurons or nerve cells, and they're butted with the head of one facing the tail of the other. If we want to understand how insecticides work, we have to get a little more familiar with how the neuron works. Now, this is a nerve cell. And one of the things you should notice about the nerve cell as soon as you see it is that the nerve cell resembles a tree. We give the branches, the trunk, and the roots of this microscopic nerve tree some very different names. The branches of the tree are called the dendrites, and this is where the nerve impulse actually comes into the nerve cell. The trunk of the tree is called an axon. The roots are called terminal branches, and the nerve impulse leaves, for lack of a better term, from this point to move on to the next neuron. So we've given you just a brief description of the parts of the system and how an electrical impulse kind of moves through the neuron. Let's map out the nerve impulse and how it moves through the neuron, and then let's talk about the nerve impulse and how it moves from one neuron to the next. The nerve impulse starts in the dendrites. It then moves into the axon. And it eventually reaches the terminal branches. Remember, the impulse is carrying some important information to breathe, or for a heart to beat, or for muscles to move, and so on. Now, we've got a dilemma. How do we get this electrical signal that's carrying important information from one neuron to the next? Well, that's the genius of how the nervous system's designed. The nervous system is not strictly electrical, it's also chemical in nature. What follows can get a little complicated, but to understand it better, I want you to think about the idea of a door and a key. A key opens a door, and when a door opens, stuff moves through the door, right? If you can grab a hold of that, you can better understand how the nerve cell works, and by extension, how insecticides work. If we magnify the terminal branches, the tips are actually called terminal buttons, and we magnify the dendrites of the next nerve cell, we begin to see this key and door idea. The round things, the little packages with the black dot inside, are neurotransmitters, chemicals. In our terminology, these are the keys needed to open the doors of the next neuron. And these gray things are called gated sodium channels. For our discussion, I want you to think of these as the doors in the next neuron. A key, neurotransmitter, is released from one neuron, and it's used to open a door, gated sodium channels, on the next neuron. Now, something else you need to notice is that there's an electrical charge difference between the inside and the outside of the nerve cell. The stuff outside the cell is really high in sodium, and it has a positive charge. The stuff inside the cell is negatively charged. Now, it doesn't take a genius to remember that nature hates for things to not be equal. So nature would love to send some positively charged sodium into the cell to even stuff out. This whole idea of nature liking things to be even can sound really strange and hard to follow, but it really isn't. Think about a glass of water. You have lots of stuff inside the water, right, inside the glass, but not lots of water outside. If you poke a hole in that glass, water will rush out because nature hates for things to not be equal. It pours out because nature is trying to even things up. The same thing happens in a nerve cell. Nature would like a bunch of positively charged things to be inside the cell too. So if the doors open, sodium is going to rush in. So let's get back to the nerve cell. An impulse comes along, and that electrical impulse is supposed to tell muscles to move, blood to pump, air to be drawn in, etc. The electrical signal tells the neuron to release a neurotransmitter, a key, and the key opens the door on the next neuron. When that happens, once again, a bunch of stuff, that positive stuff, rushes through the door. The key, the neurotransmitter, is released. The key attaches to the door's gated sodium channels. The doors open. And when that happens, sodium rushes in through those open doors. Now, because sodium rushes in, it's going to change the charge inside the cell. Now, do you see what happened? We changed the chemical signal back into an electrical signal. We moved that electrical signal from one neuron across a gap to another. It's giving that information to breathe, to move, etc. And again, for lack of a better term, that cell now fires. Now, everything needs to get back to normal, though. It's not good for the nerve cell to keep firing. It has to transfer information. So the nervous system then releases a chemical that chews up the key so the doors can shut again and everything can go back to the way it was. When that happens, the doors shut and positively charged stuff can't rush in anymore. The store is closed, so to speak. Some other things happen, and we don't need to talk about those things here, but they cause the nerve cell to revert back to its normal negative charge. In the meantime, the signal to breathe or move and so on is sent down the neuron just like before. So why is that important? Why do we need to know all of this if we're just talking about insecticides? Because most insecticides are nerve poisons. They're going to mess up the signal telling the insect to breathe or move and so on, and they're going to do that maybe here in the dendrites, or they're going to do that in the axon. Pyrethroids, for instance, are an axonic nerve poison. They might do that by overexciting the nerve cell so information can't get through, like trying to hear information across a radio with lots of static, or they might just stop the signal from moving at all. The end result, though, is all the same. Instead of having this, the brain connected to a nervous system that tells the body to do important things, by shutting down the signal in a neuron, you effectively have this, a brain with no access to the nervous system. Maybe it would be more accurate for us to say that sometimes the nervous system is compromised. Remember, that static idea can happen as well. It's not just shutting it down. It might be overloading that cell so that it can't transport information. When an insecticide shuts down the nervous system, though, when it leaves the brain pretty much isolated and unable to carry information, needed to move or breathe or pump blood, those important things needed to sustain life can't happen. The insect dies. This was a basic introduction to understanding how insecticides work. Stay tuned to Burris Agronomy U for more information about how specific insecticide families work. Thanks for watching.